Hi, I'm Kim William Gordon, and welcome back to Mind Matters. I'm here with Michael Carper, professor of philosophy at Lindenwood University, and we're going to be talking about a topic that's very timely and at times somewhat frightening. It is human augmentation, what some people refer to as humanity 2.0. As we get deeper into the technological innovations of the 21st century touching the 22nd century, we are going to find ourselves with the power and the ability to begin augmenting the human experience both physically and virtually. We're already beginning to see the beginnings of the virtual enhancement through things like Project Google Glass, where you put the glasses on and now you're looking at reality through an artificial construct that's being generated by a computer. On the physical augmentation side, there are things like chips being put in the base of skulls. There are DNA augmentations. There are genetic engineering experiments to really redesign what being a human is. And that's part of our conversation today, because we've never defined what being a human is, and so we really need to think about what becoming a human 2.0 implies. So, Michael, you have some thoughts on this topic.
Well, yeah, as a philosopher, I always approach things, from my discipline, of course. One of the principal traditional questions in philosophy is simply to ask the question, what are people for? What are human beings for? What's the point of being human? And this opens up the question of, what is human nature? What does it mean even to have a nature? And when asking that question, philosophers see that we need to ascertain the limits of something. What are its boundaries that designate what it is over and against what other things are?
So do you think we're pushing those boundaries with this advanced technologies?
I think that that's what we are doing, yeah. When it comes to human beings, there's an added dimension to our nature, and that is the normative dimension. There are obviously natural limits to us. We can't physically fly.
Right.
We need technology to do that. But with human beings, there's also the question, what should we do? What ought we to do? The normative dimension.
But we're not accustomed to asking that question.
No, we're not.
And every technological innovation, all the way from hunter-gatherer period to agricultural age to the metallurgy age to the hydraulic ages, humans have just simply pushed forward. I think what makes this even more interesting and perhaps even more frightening is we now are seriously considering re-engineering what the human genome looks like, what our DNA is composed of. And you have to step back and question, is that a rightful thing for us to be doing? Right. In our previous conversation, you said something to the effect that that gives us almost a godlike status, and I indeed concur.
I think technology, in fact, is, and just the whole advance of science in general, is all part of, and I'm not going to get into cause and effect here, but it's all part of the secularization of society. And so, as we, over the past few centuries since the Enlightenment, have abandoned religion and seeing ourselves as being in service of God, we have become the gods. And
so we had a previous conversation, and let's pick that up again. One of the most revolutionary technologies that ignited really the first industrial age through the fourth industrial age, where we're on the verge of today, was a simple invention called movable type by Gutenberg about 500-600 years ago.
Yeah.
No one could have predicted the impact of that technology. In fact, some people found it quite frightening. But at that time, there was literally less than 1% to 2% of the population of the planet that were literate, that could even read or write. And all of the people that could read or write were centralized in a power structure that was typically associated with a church. There have been incredible changes to us as humans as a result of that technology. Should we continue along that pace? Because what that technology provided us was just a snapshot of what we have in front of us and what we could be.
Right. Well, one of the paradoxes with technology with reference to human beings is that it obviously is part of our nature to create technology, you know. And
We seem to be wired
And
that
so we
way,
have that
yes.
tension between, you know, creating things that push the natures of things over and beyond into artificial realms, you could say,
Right.
you know. And on the other hand, I do think the book, which is what you're referring to, that technology was something that was proved to be very good and is actually in service of those things that we need to do in order to become more human. The Greeks especially talked about the need for education. Education in the Latin actually means to shape and to form. And so to shape and form ourselves into what we ought to become, you need to do that through education.
So a fundamental question, I think, is if we have the ability, let's say, for example, one of my quotes about myself is I personally will never be happy until there's a backup copy of me somewhere. If we have the ability to install chips in our heads, add functionality that was not there originally as part of our nature, add genetic enhancements to reduce or eliminate disease, why wouldn't we?
Well, certainly, I think we can just make a distinction between elimination of diseases like Tay-Sachs and Huntington's, which are devastating genetic disorders, and the enhancement of human beings that are already perfectly healthy and biologically normal.
Which is what we're talking about.
And so I think that, though, since I focus on the Greeks, Plato and Aristotle, who say that human beings are designed for, what people are for is to become virtuous. We're made for certain virtues, certain human excellences, courage, wisdom, justice, temperance, self-control, things of this sort. And it seems to me that we have technologies that can enhance that goal, and then we have technologies that deviate and distort that goal, that distract us from that goal. Much of the time today, in fact, it seems to me that what technologies wind up doing is they wind up serving our desires, which for the Greeks, that's the part of us that needs disciplining the most. That's the part of us that is the least philosophical, to go back to one of your opening salvos. We are not philosophical by nature. Socrates found that out in a very serious way when he was forced to drink hemlock for asking too many questions in ancient Athens.
The idea that we're not a philosophical creature is quite interesting to me, because I think that indeed is what's causing a lot of the angst as we move forward.
Yeah.
I'll repeat, I think one of the most important things that we've got in front of us in the next foreseeable future, this isn't rocket science, this isn't science fiction 100 years out, in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years tops,
I know.
we really need to begin to understand what it is to be human, what it means to be human.
Yeah.
So, for instance, one of the articles I read just recently it was a thought experiment in which the author said, if we are capable of genetically re-engineering the human DNA so that we are capable of living sustainable and enjoyable lives on the planet Mars, basically creating a new race, should we? Could we? Why wouldn't we?
Yeah. Well, are we made just to satisfy our pleasure, our desires for pleasure, which seems to be what this really amounts to? I mean, I always bluntly ask my students when I teach philosophy of technology, aren't we comfortable enough? And people are really taken aback by that question,
Yeah.
you know.
And the truth is that we're not, right?
Well, there's obviously, globally speaking, there's a very severe chasm between the haves and have-nots, right? But I think that when you look at Western society in general and the up-and-coming countries, what's going on in China, India, Indonesia, what we're really talking about is not making human beings more human, but making them more comfortable, making life more convenient, making them more capable of satisfying their desires.
Yeah, and once again, we're back to the fundamental question is what are humans for?
What are we for?
Right.
Are we for just to satisfy ourselves
Yeah.
in some piggish manner,
Yeah.
right? Or are we here for something higher?
And as we get deeper into the 21st century, We are now at 7 billion, tracking to 9 billion,
Yeah.
tracking to 20 billion is what projections seem to indicate at this point.
Yeah.
At what point does sustainability start collapsing the system?
Yeah.
So your thoughts on genetically modified food, because that's, if we get to 20 billion people, that's the only way we're going to be able to feed them, is if we have some kind of an artificial Soylent Green, if you will, solution. So what are your thoughts there?
I'm a critic of a lot that passes for conventional medicine today, and what passes for conventional wisdom on nutrition and that sort of thing. We've talked about before how 20, 30 years ago, medicine told us to stay away from butter and eat margarine. And now we realize that the hydrogenated oils that make up margarine, an artificially produced food, right? It's a synthetic food, are one of the worst things you can put in your body. They are actually cultivating of heart disease, and that sort of thing, you know. And so I can't help but wonder about this next step of actually genetically modifying food, right? Thinking we're doing the right thing. We don't really know the effects of these things yet.
So if we have no reservation to genetically modified food, and we have no reservation to genetically modify animals, then it seems logical extension that we have no reservation to genetically modify humans.
Right. This is the way science always thinks, by the way. Let's see if we can just do something. But science is not equipped to ask the question, what should we do?
What should we do?
That's philosophy's job. And if you've noticed, if I could just make this point real quickly, you look on the news shows, CNN, MSNBC, et cetera, whenever there's a social problem or political issue to discuss, you'll see sociologists there, historians, political scientists, scientists of all sorts, psychologists, but you never see a philosopher on television.
Well, I agree.
Until today.
We're going to pick that topic up in just a second. We're going to take a quick break. This is an intriguing topic, and it's very germane. It's who we are, it's where we are going, it's our immediate future. See you in a minute.
So, I got this new family, and I don't know what it is about this one, but she can't seem to put down that toy all day long. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, and she even talks to it. She talks to that more than she talks to him. What's up, bro? Nice shirt. Who's she talking to? Her mom? She talks to her mom a lot.
Turn here. There. Excuse me.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course.
Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Hi, I'm Kim William Gordon. Welcome back to Mind Matter. We are talking about human augmentation. We are talking about Human 2.0. Michael, you had just mentioned the fact that as we move forward to these technological innovations, that we really do not have any philosophical throttle or governor for us to really make rational decisions. Do you have any examples of where we've done something like that?
Yes, when we left off, I made the point that science only asks the question, what can we do? it's not really equipped by its very nature to ask the question, what should we do, what ought we to do? That's a normative question that's really the domain of philosophy. A great example of this is the Manhattan Project in the 1940s during World War II, as America was trying to develop its own version of the atom bomb. The level of theory, where it was at, how it had been developed at that point in scientific history, physics theory hypothesized the possibility that
would burn up the
even a
atmosphere.
small, detonating a small practice atom bomb in the Alamogordo Desert might ignite the entire and fry off the entire Earth's atmosphere. And this was a real concern for these guys. It was kind of a distant possibility. They didn't know really.
But it was there.
But it was there, and they went ahead and did it anyway. That
Yeah.
shows me that actually, I'm just going to be blunt here and say scientists cannot be trusted. They're interested in what we can do. Let's see, this would be cool. Let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can control human genetics. Let's see if we can create an artificial intelligence that mimics us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, they're always pushing the boundaries that way. But they are incapable of taking the question seriously or even positing the question, what really ought we to do? Is this a good thing to do?
Well, and I concur.
Yeah.
I think what we don't have is serious dialogue as a society and culture
No.
regarding anything that we've ever done, whether it's modifying food, modifying the human brain, adding chips into our cornea so that we're actually looking at the augmented reality through the viewpoint of a computer. With all that said, there is no way to govern this.
Yeah.
And one of my personal beliefs is that somewhere on this planet, we have a clone. Someone has already manufactured a clone. Somewhere on this planet, someone is already playing around with human augmentation of chips being embedded in the brain. So if that's the given, if this stuff is occurring anyway, what do we have in front of us? Are we headed for catastrophic failure? Are we headed for an era of enlightenment? Or are we headed for a time in which we finally wise up and think, well, we shouldn't be doing that?
Yeah. I think a couple of points here. First of all, I know we all think that it's just progress from here. But I think there are two things that could get in the way of that, and that is the global environment. We'll see if that's going to sustain, because without that, forget technological
And I've got
progress.
a comment about that,
Yeah,
so
and-
good, I'm glad you brought that up.
And the next thing would be this highly complicated, very precarious economic structure, global structure that we've got going on. I mean, clearly that's in question right now, what's going on in the EU, what's going on here, what's going on all around the world, in fact. And so if either one or both of those things drop out,
We're in trouble.
Forget about technological progress.
Let me address the second point first, the economics of the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd century. Jeremy Rifkin wrote a very interesting book called The End of Work. And it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, in which he proposed that due to mass automation of factories, mass robotics, and mass computerization of the economic production system itself, that the utilization of humans would start approaching 90 to 95% of what we consider unemployment today. You don't need a human in the mix. I think we're seeing the results of that. So the question then becomes is if we get to the point that we really only need to be engaged with the economy, they call this the post-scarcity economy, by the way, that power is plentiful, resources are cheap, food is almost free, you know, idealistic utopian viewpoint.
Yeah.
But if that happens, what is the role of humans? We keep getting back to that topic. One of the conversations that I've had with a number of folks is when you look from an anthropologist viewpoint at the hunter-gatherer period, that many anthropologists believe that we only worked 1 or 2 days out of the week hunting and finding food. And so the question is, what did we do during the rest of that time? And my answer is, well, of course, what we did is we invented music, we invented art, we invented language, we invented who we are. And so I'm not finding that us having a 95% unemployment rate is such a bad thing, but we've got to figure out how we're going to manage that. What does that mean? Because we are so accustomed to this capitalistic society, which is only realistically, about 250, 300 years of age in tops, that somehow or another is how we're supposed to be conducting ourselves. And the truth of the matter is that's an aberrant blip. That we've been around for 120, 150,000 years, and only for the last 200 or 300 years have we had this invention called an economy. The other topic about the environment, and this is just an aside, but it's very interesting to me, there is an organization called the Long Now Foundation. The Long Now Foundation is designed specifically to try to bring deep thought to the human experience. So this is a team of think tank experts who are thinking about human condition 1,000 years from now, 5,000 years, 10,000 years from now. And one of their thought experiments is the question arose, we have the ability, now that we've harnessed the power of genetics, to actually start putting the planet back the way we found it, to start bringing the animals that we caused to go into extinction back from the dead, if you will. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, first of all, technology, the reason why we have these problems in the first place is actually because of technology. That's another reason why I always like to get my students to question, why is it we always turn to science and technology to get us out of the very problems it created in the first place?
Put us in the beginning.
Just a simple example. All of the pollutants that give us cancer today and pollute our air and all of that, pollute our water, came from advances in science and technology. You go back far enough in history, those chemicals didn't even exist. And so why should we turn to science and technology to get us out of the very problems they created? So that's something to think about. Also, I think if I could deal with the question about the issue about work, it seems to me that one of the points of being a person is to work. That work, in fact, is something that's essential to us.
You think that's a natural condition?
I think it's part of our limits. It's interestingly, since the Great Depression, there has been a severe decrease, as you know, in the number of farms and farmers for every year up until last year. We've finally had an increase in the number of farms. People are going back to farming. This old-fashioned job that's supposed to be meaningless and stupid and too menial.
Yeah.
We had our first increase in the number of farms and farmers last year for the first time since the 30s. That's interesting.
So we're returning back to the agricultural age.
Yeah, I mean, people are finding meaning in that. Yeah. And you know, I think one reason why we question the meaningfulness of work today is technology. The Industrial Revolution, the computer revolution, has created so many meaningless jobs for us. People don't find meaning in this work. I used to work one of them where I worked on a computer just processing information 8 hours a day. I never felt good about my job at the end of the day. I was just mentally numbed and tired. You know, that's why I love my job now. I get to talk ideas with students. That's a lot more meaningful than just processing information on a computer.
Right.
So
the idea that we have during the industrial age created so much meaningless activity. So you're right, agricultural age, and then we started bumping into the industrial age. The agricultural age was composed of a lot of innovation, a lot of thinking, a lot of connection to the earth. When we bumped into the industrial age, especially at the beginning of the production in the factory age, think about Ford Motor Company at its very origin, in which the factory workers were working 60, 70 hours a week, and they were basically robots. They would take one part and do this all day long. The bots are going to do that much more effectively and more efficiently than we can, and they should, because I think we ended up with a whole suite of jobs that had nothing to do with what we're good at. But the question remains, and I'm not arguing whether humans by nature need to work, although I would put a caveat there. I think humans by nature are artists as well. I think
we're made for creativity.
Very creative creatures.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that needs to be a component of someone having a satisfying lifestyle. And when you're doing this as a robot, we are 100,000 years away
Yeah.
from us having satisfying lives. I don't know what the answer there is, but I know that I truly believe that the industrial age has gotten us to the point that we've learned a lot of bad things in a very short order. So I embrace the innovation that's coming down the pike, but I agree with you that without moderation, we don't know where this is taking us.
Yeah. Will Durant was famously asked by Bill Moyers years ago in one of his famous interviews. Will Durant was a famous historian of philosophy. And Bill Moyers said, in all your studies, what's the one lesson you learned? And he said, human beings are not very capable of moderation.
I agree
That
with
was
that.
his answer. And that's one of the principal virtues that the Greeks talk about.
Is
as
all
what are
things in
people for?
moderation.
If
Yeah.
we don't learn how to moderate our desires, which technology seems to just
Enhance.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, you know, go after this pleasure, go after that pleasure. But if we don't learn how to moderate and temper and put limits on those, then we don't become a good society.
Well, and we are also at the edge of redefining what individual self-worth is all about. So, for example, I read an article a while ago about a survey that was done with little girls. And it was a very interesting survey, but one of the little girls' quotes, these are little girls that are connected 8, 9, 10 hours a day, Facebook, text, whatever it may be. She said that when I don't have my phone, I'm not sure I know who I am.
Wow, that's so sad.
And it struck me that we are creating a generation whose self-worth, self-identification is cloud-based.
Yeah.
So I coined a phrase because I think we're beyond the netizens, which is the digital natives. I think we are now into a generation of what I call cloudizens. These are citizens that are beginning to live in the cloud. They are an extension of the network that floats around them.
Yeah. I think, to speak to this, I'm a pluralist. I'm a hardcore pluralist. I believe in having different cultures and ways of life. Technology has leveled that globally.
Yes.
And what we are creating is not just a teenager like the one you're referring to, but creating that kind of person globally now. And so everyone's going to become like that.
I
and we're
agree.
going to have a monolithic culture of a bunch of teenagers doing this. Is that a good thing? That's an image to be left with.
That's an intriguing question.
Yeah.
That concludes us for today. Fascinating topic. This is going to impact your future. It's impacting us today. Join us in the conversation. I'll see you again.